Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. This is Borys Tizenhausen with you. In this episode, Medvedev is on a roll again. This time, he's gone from Colombian and Mexican cartels all the way to US Special Forces in Kyiv. Meanwhile, Ukraine and the EU have proposed their own peace plan, already with red lines. The White House is studying it, how Putin will try to trick Trump in Alaska. And once again, about the large-scale drone attack on oil refineries in the Russian Federation. Iran is furious over Trump's route through Zangezur, and Latvia has once again deported a fan of the Russian world. The Russian world is in danger. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's get into it. So Medvedev, after a short break, after he, remember, summoned 2 nuclear submarines, apparently escaped from rehab again and made his way back to the internet. This time, his imagination turned out to be much more vivid. I quote, "European politicians are trying to interfere with American efforts to resolve the Ukrainian conflict from the very beginning," he wrote. He also claimed that Ukraine, attention, uses mercenaries from Colombian and Mexican cartels to fight against Russia. And he suggested that Donald Trump send special forces to Kyiv. Well, what can you say to that? So, if the US president really did instruct the Pentagon by directive to prepare strikes against drug cartels in Latin America using military units, there's actually a better option. They should be sent to Kyiv, where they could carry out a brilliant counter-terrorist operation to eliminate narco-mercenaries without any risk to their own lives. Well, as they say, now the friends are not only drug addicts, Satanists, and Nazis, but now also narco-mercenaries fighting against Medvedev. You know, every person has some kind of totem animal that is supposed to protect them. I think for Medvedev, it's definitely, absolutely, you know which one. A squirrel, and it definitely won't let anyone hurt him. Well, naturally, the cartel armies have nothing better to do than fight in Ukraine. But where's the logic in that, tell me? On the contrary, Donald Trump should actually be interested in this. After all, if all the cartel armies go fight in Ukraine and die in a foreign war, the cartel will be left without any protection. So actually this should be beneficial for Donald Trump, or am I wrong maybe? All in all, that ethanol hero really did lose it with that particular phrase, honestly. Speaking of phrases and the intricate ways in which language is employed to articulate, frame, and interpret complex geopolitical events and their multifaceted consequences, it becomes absolutely imperative to delve deeply into the tangible, verifiable, and substantive outcomes that have genuinely materialized from the protracted and often devastating conflict currently under scrutiny. What precisely are the actual, concrete, measurable, and undeniably significant achievements that can be objectively attributed to the immense efforts, vast resources, and profound sacrifices expended throughout the entire duration of this challenging and complex war? This critical inquiry seeks to move far beyond mere rhetorical declarations, propagandistic narratives, or abstract pronouncements of success, and instead focuses with unwavering precision on identifying the specific, demonstrable, and impactful accomplishments that have truly emerged from the multifaceted circumstances of this particular war, providing clear, irrefutable evidence of progress, success, or the attainment of strategic objectives. We must meticulously consider the various dimensions of success, whether they pertain to the realization of strategic military goals, the improvement of humanitarian conditions, the establishment of economic stability, significant political shifts, the fostering of regional security, or the eventual establishment of a lasting and equitable peace. Therefore, the fundamental and pressing question remains: what are the actual demonstrable and impactful achievements that have genuinely emerged from the multifaceted and challenging circumstances of this particular war, providing clear evidence of progress and success, moving beyond superficial assessments to a thorough and comprehensive evaluation of the true impact and legacy of the conflict. With so many resources available and so many troops deployed there, what exactly have they managed to achieve? And then Putin, chuckling like an old flasher in the park, said, well, the Sea of Azov is now an internal Sea of Russia, and he chuckled like that. You could already block off the Sea of Azov with the bodies of Russians you've killed in this war, just like that. So how could he leave Kherson and Zaporizhzhia if then it would stop being an internal sea? Of course, he wants everything. He's just messing with people's heads, trying to fool Trump. It's no coincidence that people are saying now that he's doing everything he can to first talk, to negotiate with Trump. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe he'll somehow offer him some kind of deal. So, in general, let's talk about what's actually happening right now with this. On Wednesday, Trump announced that Russia is ready to leave the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions in exchange for full control over Donbass. He shared this information with European leaders during a conversation. After that, Zelensky stated that Moscow now seems more ready for a ceasefire, since such a statement has been made. Then on Thursday, Witkoff says, somehow I misunderstood something. And in reality, what Putin wants is simply attention at first, actually for a ceasefire. Putin wants Ukraine to withdraw its troops completely from Donbass, while he won't withdraw from anywhere. This way, he would be able to attack Kharkiv. Well, what a wonderful proposal. So when it became clear that Putin had been misunderstood, Zelensky and the European leaders rejected this plan, wrote their own, met, and passed it on to the White House. This is what is happening at the moment. So let me emphasize again, Trump has an enormous resource to put pressure on Putin, truly enormous. Sanctions. A bit later, I'll tell you how everyone who could potentially be targeted by these sanctions started scrambling. They really started scrambling. Well, friends, let me remind you that right now the front is holding thanks to the heroism of our soldiers. And that's why I want to remind you about our fundraiser for FPV drones on fiber optics for the 101st Brigade, which is holding and not giving up Chasiv Yar to the Russians. They're taking them out in droves there, showing incredible heroism and destroying all that filth. Let's help them. I'll show you this message again.
Wishing you good health. We are servicemen of the Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 101st Separate Brigade of the General Staff Security, named after Colonel General Hennady Vorobyov. We are carrying out combat missions in the Kostiantynivka direction. We are addressing Borys Tizenhausen and the viewers of his channel to request the purchase of FPV drones on fiber optics to carry out essential combat missions. Glory to Ukraine.
In short, real heroes are protecting us, protecting Ukraine, and I'm not afraid to say it, protecting Europe right now, there in Chasiv Yar. Let's help them. The link to donate is in the description of this video and also in the comments. There you'll find a private number, a mono, and a PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. A huge thank you to everyone from me personally. I see all of you, and I want to say a personal thank you to each of you, also on behalf of our soldiers. If you're not watching on my channel, here is a QR code that will take you directly to the donation page. Let's help our soldiers. And now, at night, this is what Ukrainian UAV operators are capable of. Last night, Ukrainian drones carried out a large-scale attack on Russian oil refineries. In this case, the refinery in Saratov was targeted. As a result, a massive fire broke out there. This is 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Well, why am I even talking? Videos are always brighter, more colorful, and with a bit of fire. Let's take a look.
Where? Yes.
Not no, but yes. By the way, here's another video.
Yes. Oh.
Every time with these 10 or 15-second videos, I have to keep bleeping them because of these Russians. They're just too emotional. Well, Saratov airport is closed. There's information that Engels was also hit. We are waiting for confirmation. By the way, for the first time, the airport in Gelendzhik was closed for 2 days. It opened today and immediately closed again. There are a lot of videos online showing how in broad daylight in Sochi or in nearby Sirius, civilians are being evacuated from the beach, or rather driven off as the siren sounds. They march off in neat columns with inflatable rings and mattresses tucked under their arms, heading somewhere. Maybe to shelters, maybe to some cafeterias, I don't know. They complain about being driven off the beach. Well, that's how it goes. That's what happens when your country starts a war. But when they all march off the beach in such an orderly fashion, I think it's hard to come up with a more vivid example, one that so perfectly embodies the phrase, off the beach. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because it lowers the chances that, well, that your nerves will snap at the worst possible moment from calm analysis. That's for sure. So subscribe, and as they say, let's keep our nerves intact and safe. And now let's talk about who didn't like the peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. There, well, it was immediately clear. Iran opposed the project to create a transport corridor between parts of Azerbaijan in the south of Armenia. Well, in general, it was natural and predictable. And let me remind you, this corridor, which connects Azerbaijan and its exclave Nakhichevan, passes through southern Armenia almost along the border with Iran. This corridor will be controlled by the United States for 99 years, just so there are no ambiguities about that. So Iran is against it. See, as soon as Armenia and Azerbaijan made peace, so many opponents appeared at once. No, we don't want that. Let's do it again. And I quote, "The advisor to the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, Ali Akbar Velayati, says, is the South Caucasus some kind of no man's land for Trump to lease? The Caucasus is one of the most sensitive geographic points in the world. And this corridor will not become a transit route owned by Trump, but, attention, a graveyard for his mercenaries." Velayati also expressed confidence that Russia is strategically opposed to this corridor. He emphasized that Tehran is ready to independently defend the security of the South Caucasus. Maybe you should first pull back your own terrorist tentacles from everywhere. Now they're talking about defending it. Look at how the doves, the crows of peace, have started cackling, right? Just yesterday I was talking about how signing this peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan is not beneficial for Russia, Iran, or China. And here's the immediate reaction. First of all, regarding this so-called Trump route. Well, obviously, the main condition had to be that it would be named that way. It's not just the Trump route, it's the Trump route for peace and something else as well. No one is going to ask Iran, what is Armenia supposed to do on its own territory? In other words, Armenia made this decision. Secondly, China is speaking with Iran's voice. They have a strategic partnership, cooperation. China saw this Trump route, which is now being called part of its One Belt, One Road project. So, the increased US influence on Iran's border is also clearly something China doesn't like. As for whether Russia will be against it, well, of course, they're against it. Naturally, they're against it. They thought they had a monopoly on peacekeeping there, which of course it wasn't, but it allowed them to control, influence, and maintain a presence in the region. As soon as their so-called peacekeepers were kicked out, notice how the process immediately started to move forward. That's an axiom. Wherever Russia leaves, stable peace immediately follows. Why is that? Well, I don't think that needs any explanation. Now, regarding the idea that this route will become a graveyard for US or Trump mercenaries instead of a transit corridor, well, I'd like to see who in Iran would dare to do that. In general, the story with Iran is very instructive. The Ayatollah's regime survived after the 12-day war. They learned from their mistakes. They'll bury their nuclear facilities even deeper when they develop nuclear weapons. But by then it will be too late for the world to react, and the chance for internal protest will have been lost. Because after the nuclear program was bombed, and even before that there were protests, once part of the air defense systems were destroyed, they immediately started tightening information control in Iran. Elon Musk's Starlink was banned, the only way to freely access the internet, not only to receive information but also to share it. What's happening in Iran, and how they've started cracking down even harder on dissent there? And one more absolutely remarkable story from Latvia. There, a young prodigy threatened the entire Russian world, yet says himself, "I'll fight in Akhmat, Latvia." Wow, that's something. After that, as expected, he will be deported to the Russian Federation. His father records a video, also a fan of the so-called Russian world, by the way, and asks for help, saying his 25-year-old son has been deported to Russia. Someone, please help. Why does he need help over there? It's his homeland, after all. Everything's fine in the homeland. Everything's wonderful. What could possibly happen to him there? And I know, and by the way, this father records the video and says, well, now I guess new acquaintances and new opportunities await him there. That's right. Yes, I know exactly what new opportunity awaits him in Russia. He'll be able to improve his entire family's financial situation, only he probably won't ever find out about it. I'm amazed by this phenomenon every single time. You live just across the border from Russia, so why are you sitting there in Latvia, which you hate so much, huh? By the way, I actually really liked Latvia. I think they just don't want them to go to places like Voronezh, Syzran, or maybe even further. I think they want the Russian world to come to these beautiful European streets so they can kick everyone out, take everything, divide it up, and settle there themselves. There's an image that stuck with me since childhood. My grandmother told me about it. She was a teacher, a school principal, and later the head of a girls' gymnasium. She enlightened me, you could say. She knew many languages, I don't even know how many, and she would read me books in different languages. She also educated me in the arts. So, regarding this painting, of course, you've all seen it. It's called Moving to a New Apartment. I can't remember the artist's last name right now. But anyway, you've seen it. A working-class family is moving into some apartment with high ceilings and parquet floors. There's a woman standing there in a jacket, obviously altered from someone else's kids, and somewhere in the back of the apartment her husband is already settling in. And she moves in and looks around. Such high ceilings, luxurious parquet floors, wallpaper even with gold trim. And she thinks, now we'll really live, now I'll live here. Well, you can tell from the surroundings that the previous owners were well off. I mean, well, maybe they were intellectuals, maybe, from the former classes, maybe even enemies of the people. Anything is possible. Their fate is unknown. But judging by everything, things didn't turn out very well for them. And this scene, it's, well, the barely concealed joy of the collective Sharikov moving into Professor Preobrazhensky's apartment. And this is the Russian world. It seems to me that's what they want. We want to come here to you. We don't want to go back to our own dump, excuse my French. We want to live here, to live in your apartments. The whole world forever, and oh, there's one more thing. No, yes, this is the most important detail in this picture. When one of the children, as they're bringing their things into this big, bright, beautiful apartment, he's holding a portrait of Stalin. As if to say, this is the most important thing they brought with them. Now we'll nail it up here, hang it somewhere, as if to say, this is who we should thank for our happy childhood. You see what I mean? I think this is exactly what the Russian world is. This is the essence of the Russian world. The whole world will forever remember this Russian army, which, upon entering Ukraine, immediately began looting Ukrainian homes and apartments. Then these convoys loaded with stolen goods moved toward Belarus. They sent it off. There are several hours of video, filmed by some kind, maybe even those who hacked it, Belarusian cyber partisans who hacked Aeroflot, showing these Russians with their faces, with completely recognizable surnames, talking to the operator, sending huge plasma TVs to far-off corners, some bundles of used clothes, and other things. There are transcripts, phone calls, wiretaps. Who sent what to whom, what kind of gold jewelry. These Ukrainians live so well here. I found some rings for you over there. All of that. That's how the Russian army will be remembered. An army of looters. Yes, they stole tractors, stole cars, drove them over there. That's why I believe it's absolutely the right decision to send these deep Russians back to their homeland, even for minor support of Putin's war or for promoting the Russian world. Promoting Russia's greatness, waving Russian flags, drunken dancing to Kalinka Malinka somewhere, this should be equated with Nazi propaganda and accordingly result in being sent home. By the way, I truly, sincerely admire the Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians who long ago stopped being polite about this, understanding that every one of these deep Russians will eventually come out, and with their gold-toothed mouths shout, "Putin, send in the troops to the squares!" And they'll crawl out of every crack. So, in short, to make sure none of them crawl out, they simply shouldn't be there. That's the logic. But look, before Putin even had a chance to properly scare everyone with the Oreshnik, Russia has unveiled a new super-secret weapon. Quoting, "Russia has another latest weapon besides the Oreshnik," said Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. He did not specify what kind of weapon it is, so, quote, here's the quote, "I can't name what I'm not supposed to name, but it exists." He also noted that in today's realities, it's inappropriate to use the term détente when referring to Russia and the US. American systems have started appearing more and more often in regions where this has a direct impact on Russia's security. So, what happened? And why is that? And why have 2 more NATO countries appeared as well? What do you think cause and effect? In Russia, the first subject in school should be causal relationships, then you wouldn't need to teach any of the others. Well, if before Putin at least showed some animated cartoons, now, well, they used to make them at Soyuz Multfilm, remember, back in 2018. This is a super wonder weapon. It will kill everyone, and this one will fly off and destroy the galaxy. And this one, well, it's totally top secret. This black square here, behind it is a super weapon, but we can't show it to you. But now they don't even bother anymore. We have a super weapon. We won't tell you what it's called, but we have it. Just trust us. Well then, yeah. All right, got it. By the way, to this day, no one fully understands what's going on with the nuclear arsenal of the Russian Federation. What condition is it even in? And about what I mentioned earlier, about how those who might fall under American sanctions are getting nervous. India has already been hit. Well, let's put it this way. It's not terrible, but it's unpleasant, a 25% tariff. Putin had a phone conversation with Brazilian President Lula da Silva and informed his Brazilian counterpart about the main outcomes of the recent meeting between Putin and Medvedev. So, did he tell him about the real threat of American sanctions, or is it just more of the same, meaning they can keep playing games there? But the real reason this call took place is this. Brazil is expressing concern about the possible introduction of additional tariffs by the US due to its purchases of Russian fuel. The Financial Times reports the latest sanctions against India confirm that something unpleasant could also happen to Brazil. Let us recall that Brazil buys large volumes of diesel fuel and fertilizers from Russia. And according to the same Financial Times, Russia has offered Brazil discounts of up to 30% on diesel fuel. Well, naturally, Turkey is also a major buyer of this fuel. In general, since 2022, Brazil has started buying volumes from Russia that are many, many times greater than before. That is, if before 2022 they bought fuel for $95 million, then in 2024 they already bought it for $5.5 billion. So basically, Brazil has become the next after India. Brazil is the main next candidate for sanctions. So who else could be targeted? Theoretically, Turkey. Turkey actually buys $7 billion worth of fuel. India has already been targeted. The United Arab Emirates. Now, this is interesting. They are the main hub for transshipment of Russian fuel. Then it goes to Africa, to Asia. They blend it there, meaning they dump it into tanks, mix it, and on paper, this oil is no longer Russian, but something else. Basically, they change the origin by mixing the oil and then send it on to Africa, Asia, and so on. And of course, China as well, without a doubt. In general, Brazil, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates are being named as likely candidates for sanctions pressure. That is, if Trump has, as they say, the political will. Well, Alaska is coming up soon. They say that Volodymyr Zelensky will also be present there, just in case, Just in case, as they say. It's possible that there will even be a 3-way meeting, Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. That is, first Trump and Putin, and then they might meet with Zelensky. Well, let's wait for Alaska then. But let me emphasize once again, the Russian demands are simply Putin's wishes repackaged. I want 4 regions. If Trump falls for it again, or let's put it this way, pretends not to notice that Putin is trying to trick him, then, well, there's no reason to expect any progress in the negotiations. Although I think that, in any case, Putin is just stubbornly digging in his heels, that mangy scoundrel, and will keep making demands. He saw that it's possible to break ultimatums. He saw that it's possible to drag things out. So why are we guessing? We'll wait. And every day, friends, I'll keep you informed. Because for the second year now, you've had calm analysis from me without any days off. Only one day off a year. But otherwise, it's every day. And I am extremely grateful to you for the fact that our community is growing, for the fact that you watch this program. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. Let's help our soldiers with the fundraising. I ask you very much. Wishing us all a peaceful day. And of course, glory to Ukraine.